Okay, so I was in the shower last night, and then I remembered that I have to pray before I actually start preaching. So, is there any prayer requests before we start? Yeah?
My friend is on my road.
What's his name? First name, sorry?
Y-D-E-S. It's a man.
Okay, yeah.
He just got news this week that they won't be able to move probably a year to 18 months to live. He's younger than me, and they're like our best friends. We just found out.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Joe.
I thank the Lord for meeting here. It's a great place, great church.
Thank you. Okay, anything else? All right, well, let's pray. Jesus, I thank you that you want to work in our lives and that you don't just give up on us when we mess up, and that you are full of grace and you are only love. That's all you are, and all you're capable of is love and loving others. And I pray for everybody in this church today that we would feel your spirit on us, and that you would remind us that you are real, and it's not just something that we are going to talk about and something that we do just on Sunday mornings, but that you are the only thing that matters, and that you are really, really here. I pray for Eve, and I pray that he would know that if he doesn't already, that he would grow to, ask questions about you and really try and learn about who you are, and that you love him so much. And I pray for his friends and his family that they would be reminded of that also. That no matter where he goes, that you are always with him, whether or not he knows that or not. And so I pray this morning, I don't have a long prayer just because I've never done this before in front of so many people. But I pray that you would just be here, and that when I speak this morning, that it's you speaking. And I pray that we just know that you're here with us today and every day of our entire lives. So I ask these things in your name. Amen. Wow, okay. This is kind of crazy because, like I said this morning in my story, I grew up here, and I never, ever, ever in a million years thought that I would be preaching. That's kind of crazy, but I am, and here we are. So I haven't been driving for that long, but I think I'm pretty good. And I've only been in like one accident, 1.5, but the first one wasn't my fault. Okay. So one afternoon after school, it was a really beautiful day. So my brother and my best friend and I decided to go to our trailer in Brunswick. And it was a beautiful early May day, just really awesome. And so we loaded up and headed out and had a really fun time, and it was a lot of fun. So we left around 8 p.m., but we were having a lot of fun, so I didn't really just want to go right home because we were having a lot of fun. So I took a longer route home, and I knew the road. I'd taken the route before. And so I was driving it, and we're in rural New Brunswick, and then we're driving even further into the middle of nowhere. So we're really out there in the middle of nowhere. So the pavement gets a bit more chewed up, and then there's more potholes and rocks, and then there's no more pavement, and we're on a dirt road in early May. Okay? Dirt road, early May. So there's no houses on the road except for one really creepy house. It just gave off some weird vibes. So we're driving past this house, and we're talking about how creepy that house was, and then 1 kilometer or 2 down the road, my van starts veering towards the ditch. And I tried to pull it out, and we're not going fast, because I couldn't go fast, and I was, trying to pull myself back onto the road, but the van just wasn't doing it, and I got stuck. Dirt road, early spring. Did she show you a picture? Yeah, that's the picture. So I'm getting out of the car, like I'm putting the car in reverse, trying to back out of this hole, and I can't get out. And my brother and Aiden, they get out, or my brother and my friend get out, and they start pushing on the front of the van, and they're trying to get us out, but they can't. And Aiden says, "Abby, we cannot move this thing." And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, you don't even have your permit. I'm a licensed driver. I think I know a little better than you. So I get out, and then I see this, and then I think, oh, okay. And what you can't see in this picture is that out of the 4 wheels, Two of them are so deep in the mud we can't see them. One of them is partially covered, and the other one is off the ground by that much. So there was no way that I was getting out of this. So way deep down in my soul, I knew I'm going to be stuck here because I just can't get out. But then I also knew that there was no way that I was going to call Dad and tell him that I was stuck in the mud. Absolutely not. So I'm starting to get nervous, and Aiden is freaking out, and my friend's just laughing, and the haunted house thing is up the road, and I think, okay, I just need to get back in the van, reverse it, and if that doesn't work, I'll try something else, and then if that doesn't work, maybe I'll call Dad. So I get back in the van, and my phone rings, and it's Dad. I don't know how he thought to call me at that very moment, but he called me and said, "So when are you guys getting back?" And I said, "Soon, maybe? But actually, you know that dirt road? I'm really stuck there right now, and I don't think I can get out." So long story short, he was able to get the caretaker at our campground to come and pull us out, and everything was fine. But there was no way that I would ever have gotten out of that mess if my dad hadn't have called me there. I would have gotten us in a whole lot worse. And when we read the Bible, when we start learning the stories and really seeing the whole narrative of Jesus' life in there, we can see that the whole thing is just a big story of how humans messed up and God gives us grace for it. The whole thing. So the first humans were perfect. So God is literally perfect. And there's no fault in him whatsoever. He's absolutely pure and holy. And something so pure and holy, like God, cannot be tainted by anything broken or evil or impure. It's like oil and water. And God created us for a relationship with him. So when the first humans were created, we were pure and holy as well. And we walked and talked with the actual presence of God. And we were inseparable. And it was exactly as God intended, and it was good. But we know that it didn't stay like this, because if it did, then we wouldn't be here right now, right? Because humans are endlessly curious, and God gave them the gift of free will, we decided to disobey and to walk away from God. We traded in this sun, this absolute perfection and life, for the evils that were beginning to brew in this world. And we were broken. And nothing broken can be in the presence of God, so we were cast out. And the separation between God and man was so huge, and there was nothing that we could have done about it. But God wants us so deeply, and he so desires to be in a relationship with us. So even though we had turned our back on him, he comes back at us with a whole lot of grace and gives us the law. So the law being the 10 Commandments and the Torah and things like that. And the whole point of the law is to give God's people extremely clear instructions on how to become pure again, pure so that we may have a relationship with him as we once did. So the book of Leviticus is full of rituals. And these include sacrifices, and certain sacrifices showed that the Israelites were thankful to God. So they offered things like grain, and they did fellowship offerings, which I'm not sure what that is. But there were also sacrifices that showed that they were sorry, like burnt offerings and sin offerings and guilt offerings. And there were also festivals, and the festivals were to serve as a reminder of God's work in the nation of Israel. Another part of Leviticus focuses solely on purity. Rules focusing on this helped Israelites to remain pure, but also just remain physically clean and healthy, which are what some of the rules don't really make a whole lot of sense to us, and that's probably why. There were ceremonial cleanings. There were rules about how long a woman would be unclean after childbirth and after menstruation, and there were long lists of animals that were clean and unclean. One of the coolest parts of Leviticus, I think, was the temple and the priesthood. God so wanted to be with his people that he instructed them to build a temple where he would reside in their communities with them. So at first it was a tent that could move around as the people did, but eventually they were able to build a permanent structure. And Paul explains the setup of the temple in Hebrews 9, verses 1 to around 6, and I think I have a picture of it, yeah. So the temple was a specially designed place of worship. A large outer tent was set up. The lampstand, the table, and the bread of presence, the bread of life, were placed in it. This was called the holy place. Then a curtain was stretched, and behind it a smaller inside tent set up, and this was called the Holy of Holies. After this was set up, the priests went about their duties in the large tent. Only the high priest could enter the smaller inside tent, and then only once a year, offering a blood sacrifice for his own sins and the people's accumulated sins. So like the author of Hebrews is explaining here, the Holy Spirit lived inside the Holy of Holies. And only one person, the high priest, entered once a year, and he would take the blood of a goat that had been sacrificed, and the goat's blood would take on the high priest's sins and the sins of all of Israel. So the Israelites knew exactly what to do to get closer to God again. God had been gracious enough to provide these clear and exact instructions so that they would be able to get closer to God and restore that relationship that we had broken. But there's a problem, and it's that the Israelites were not perfect. They kept messing up. They were on this roller coaster, following the law, and then they'd mess up again, and then they would do good for a little while, and then they'd mess up again. They never quite accomplished the purpose of the law, and it just seemed fruitless. When I was getting back into my van and thinking of any possible solution of getting out of this problem, thinking of any life hack videos I'd seen, thinking of some way to get just a little tiny bit of traction, it was impossible. It was fruitless. I was stuck in the mud, and there was no way that I was getting out of there on my own. So when my dad called me, I was worried, because first of all, I knew he was going to laugh at me a lot. And also, I knew that I'd made this mistake, and that I should have known better than to drive down this dirt road, but I did it anyway. But when he called me, I was relieved. Relieved because I knew that he wouldn't just leave me there to figure it out. Leave me there with my brother who is useless in scary situations. I knew that he wasn't going to do that. He was going to help me figure it out on my own. And he didn't leave me there. And neither did God. God witnessed his people constantly messing up, all the time. And he still does. But he still had grace for them. And he didn't leave them in this perpetual fight, on and on and on and on, for their purity and salvation. It wasn't right away, but eventually he sent Jesus. And Jesus arrived and changed everything. And it scared a lot of people. He broke the Sabbath. He interacted with a Samaritan woman who the Israelites would never have even looked at, really, before. When a woman who, because of the law, was forbidden from touching anyone because her period had made her ceremonially unclean, she touched Jesus. And he didn't start freaking out and make a big scene about it and make her feel bad that she was ceremonially unclean. He didn't go rush to the temple and scrub himself down and wait 5 days before he could enter the temple. He didn't do that at all. He gave her grace, and he told her that she was healed. He had grace for these people. So the laws of Leviticus that the Pharisees held so tightly to, the laws designed to bridge the gap between God and man, Jesus brought their meaning back. Because along the way, we'd lost the meaning. We'd forgotten that the whole point was so that we could live with God, in relationship with him. But the Pharisees that lost their meaning for them. And Jesus brought it back. But he didn't come in, sometimes I'd like to think he did, but he didn't come in and just smash all the law to pieces and say, no more rules. Jesus said himself in Matthew 5:17, "Don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose." So, like on the Day of Atonement in the Holy of Holies, when the blood of the goat would take on the sins of Israel, Jesus became that. He died on the cross for us. The ultimate showing of grace. He took on the sins and the mess and the brokenness of the world, and he died and he became the sacrifice to end all sacrifices. We didn't have to do the Day of Atonement anymore. We didn't have to sacrifice any more animals because he ended it. And on that day when he died and he took his last breath, there was an earthquake. And at the temple, the thick veil separating the dwelling place of God, the Holy of Holies, it tore from top to bottom. The author of Hebrews says that the curtain showed us that people can't just walk in on God, right? Because God and brokenness do not mix. So you can't just walk up to God and start talking to him. But during the earthquake, and the veil tore from top to bottom, and this was a symbol of the new era that Jesus had just brought. No longer is there anything separating us from God. We don't need a high priest to go into a temple once a year and tell God that we're sorry, because Jesus did that for us. He gave us that forgiveness. And God is among us now. He's here. And he's not living in a little tent anymore. He's out in the world. And it's not because we earned it, because we definitely didn't. We couldn't follow the law. The law was, they just kept forgetting the point of the law, and then they would get lost in it. We didn't earn anything from God at all. Ephesians 2:8 says that it is by grace that we have been saved, not by works. If we could have saved ourselves by working harder, there would be no need for Jesus. If we could have prayed enough, or atoned enough, or sacrificed enough animals, God would have looked at us and said, okay, they meet the criteria, check. You can come back to heaven now. That's not how it was. They didn't accomplish the law. They always fell short. But then God came and fulfilled it and said, you are my people again, and I'm giving you this gift. If you think that you are getting to heaven today because you're here, it's not true. That's not how it works. If you think you need to read a certain number of verses every night, nope, not it. There's no amount of verses you could read that would make you pure again. If you think you need to pray a certain number of rosaries or anything, that's not how it works, right? You can do communion, you can get baptized. Those are all good things, but that isn't going to bring you salvation. That isn't going to bring you back to God and have him forgive you if you've done enough good things in your life. The only thing, the only one, is Jesus. Out of his love and his grace, you are saved. We are invited to live in heaven again. And not even just when we die, but even right now, we're invited to live in communion with God. Just like the first humans did, right? And it's not by works. It's not because I'm preaching today that God says, Abby, yes, you're forgiven. No, it's because I've accepted Jesus Christ and said that I believe in him. It's not by faith, not by works, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So there's one final thought that I'd like to leave you with. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, do you not know that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in you? But the word for temple here is important. So, like we would call this entire building the church. The sanctuary and the gym and the choir room and all that, it's the church. But that's not the word, the Greek word used here. The word used here is naos, which describes the innermost part of the temple, the Holy of Holies, the place where God resides before Jesus tore the veil in two. So we'll end off by reading 1 Corinthians 3:16 again. Do you not know that you are the naos, the Holy of Holies, the place where God resides? And it's because of his love for you, not because you earned it. So let's pray.